What if the movies once branded too dangerous were actually exposing truths polite cinema refused to touch? Decades later, restored editions have returned much of what audiences were denied. Some missing footage adds shock, but the best restorations reveal character, politics, atmosphere, and meaning that edited prints are often destroyed. Before the countdown begins, like this video, share it with another cult film fan, and subscribe to our channel. Number 18. Deathline, 1972. Deep beneath fashionable London, the past has not died. It has simply learned to hide. Gary Sherman's British nightmare begins when a senior public official vanishes near Russell Square Station. Inspector Calhoun, played with wonderfully sarcastic irritation by Donald Pleasance, investigates while an American student and his girlfriend become unwilling witnesses. The clues lead toward abandoned railway tunnels and the descendants of workers trapped during Victorian construction. What makes the film more than a basic underground creature story is its sympathy for the threat. The surviving figure barely speaks, repeating the broken phrase, "mind the doors," because it is one of the last sounds connecting him to the human world. His actions are frightening, yet his loneliness is impossible to ignore. The famous tracking shot through his hidden chamber slowly passes decaying food, stolen belongings, and evidence of a life built from society's leftovers. Without explaining anything directly, the camera shows generations of isolation. The original British cinema submission received alterations, especially around stronger violence, while later home editions restored the complete version. Those returned moments do not merely make the movie harsher, they clarify how desperate and physically ruined this forgotten man has become. The uncut presentation also improves the contrast between Calhoun's dry police humor and the suffering below the city. What appears at first to be an exploitation shocker ultimately becomes a cruel story about progress literally building over people it chose to abandon. Number 17. Enter the Dragon, 1973. Before international action movies became carefully manufactured franchises, one performer walked onto an island and changed the industry. Bruce Lee plays a martial artist recruited by British intelligence to enter a tournament hosted by Han, a wealthy criminal operating behind palace walls. Lee also has a personal reason to accept. Han's organization is connected to the tragedy that destroyed his family. The Hall of Mirrors climax is the image everyone remembers. Han uses reflections to confuse Lee, but Lee stops chasing illusions and smashes the glass, removing the villain's advantage one panel at a time. His movements are not random punches. Each pause, expression, and change of distance tells the audience what he is thinking. British censors originally demanded edits involving combat techniques and weapons they considered imitable. The nunchaku sequence became especially controversial and remained shortened through several releases. When those restrictions were eventually lifted, earlier material was restored. Watching the complete fight reveals Lee's intended rhythm: calm observation, sudden action, then immediate control. The cuts had not removed the plot, but they had interrupted the language of his body. Often marketed as an exotic exploitation attraction in 1973, the film is now recognized as a landmark. Its uncut form shows why Lee was not simply the star of the picture. He was the creative force, teaching mainstream audiences how cinematic movement could communicate discipline, anger, humor, and philosophy without a long speech. If forgotten cinema deserves a second chance, give this video a like and tell us which restoration changed your opinion. Subscribe now, because the films ahead faced bans, courtroom battles, raids, and some of the strangest censorship decisions ever made. Number 16. Death Wish, 1974. Grief becomes a public argument in Michael Winner's controversial urban thriller. Charles Bronson plays Paul Kersey, a quiet New York architect who identifies as a liberal and dislikes guns. His certainty collapses after an attack on his family leaves his wife dead and his daughter deeply traumatized. A business trip introduces him to a different attitude towards self-defense, and he returns home carrying a revolver that slowly becomes the center of his new identity. At night, Paul rides trains and walks streets where he expects criminals to approach. The famous confrontations are tense because he rarely hunts a specific individual. Instead, he places himself in vulnerable situations and waits. Each encounter makes him more confident, while newspapers transform the unidentified vigilante into a symbol. Earlier home versions in Britain were shortened, with the opening family attack drawing the greatest concern. A later release restored the complete version. That restoration matters because the disturbing beginning establishes the emotional damage that follows. Without its full weight, Paul's transformation can look like a sudden action fantasy. Bronson's stillness can be read as strength, shock, or emotional disappearance. The final image is especially troubling. After authorities quietly push him out of New York, Paul arrives in Chicago and sees another confrontation beginning. He points his hand like a gun and smiles. The city may believe it has solved a political problem, but the man it helped create has carried the problem somewhere else. Number 15. Emmanuel, 1974. Elegant photography allowed this French sensation to enter cinemas that would never have advertised an ordinary exploitation picture. Sylvia Christel plays a young woman traveling to Bangkok to rejoin her diplomat husband. Surrounded by wealthy expatriates, luxurious houses, and constantly shifting relationships, she begins testing the boundaries of a marriage that claims to be completely modern. Yet the people encouraging her freedom often seem interested in controlling what that freedom should look like. Later scenes are less famous but more revealing. Emmanuel watches other couples, listens to experienced friends, and gradually discovers that sophistication can be another performance. The older Mario presents himself as a teacher, but his lessons blur liberation with manipulation. Different territories circulated altered versions, and the British cinema release was cut before later home editions restored material. Scene complete, the film has a slower and more deliberate shape. Emmanuel's journey does not move cleanly from innocence to confidence. She is curious, uncertain, influenced, and sometimes treated like a project by the people around her. Its huge commercial success created sequels, imitations, and an entire soft-focus style. However, the original remains interesting because it captures a contradiction at the heart of 70s exploitation. It sold the promise of personal freedom, while showing a world where powerful people were constantly defining freedom for somebody else. The restored version cannot erase the film's dated attitudes, but it allows viewers to judge the intended story, rather than a censor's shortened substitute. Number 14. Suspiria, 1977. A thunderstorm, an airport, and an impossible red building are enough to tell us that normal reality has already ended. Jessica Harper plays Susie Banyan, an American dancer arriving in Germany to study at a prestigious academy. On her first night, she sees another student fleeing in terror. By morning, that student is dead. The teachers are acting strangely, and Susie begins suffering unexplained weakness whenever she gets too close to the school's secrets. Dario Argento does not build the mystery like a detective story. He uses saturated colors, enormous rooms, whispered voices, and Goblin's pounding score to create the feeling of a fairy tale turning poisonous. The opening death remains the film's most famous scene. A frightened woman runs through an ornate apartment building while an unseen force transforms windows, ropes, colored glass, and architecture into parts of a nightmare. The sequence is carefully designed rather than realistic, which makes it feel even less escapable. The original British cinema version was cut, and several international editions appeared with different running times. Later releases restored the stronger imagery and presented the movie in versions closer to Argento's design. The missing seconds matter because his suspense depends on musical timing. A shortened impact or interrupted movement can ruin the dreadful rhythm connecting image and sound. Uncut, the Academy feels like a living machine. Teachers observe from corridors, footsteps travel where nobody should be walking, and even decorative patterns seem to guide Susie toward danger. Number 13. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. One bad route turns a cheerful family trip into a war between two versions of America. The Carter family drives through the desert toward California, ignoring warnings to stay on the main road. Their vehicle breaks down inside a former military testing area, leaving parents, children, grandchildren, and dogs separated as darkness approaches. From the surrounding hills, another family watches them with the patience of people who know every rock and hiding place. Wes Craven builds the early tension from ordinary mistakes. Big Bob walks away looking for help. Doug focuses on protecting his baby. Nobody understands the entire situation until the attack on the trailer destroys the illusion that their family unit can simply wait for rescue. That trailer sequence became the film's defining moment because several threats arrive at once. The Desert Clan invades the safest space. Family members panic in different directions, and the survivors are forced to react before they can process what they have seen. British cinema and early video versions were shortened, but later releases restored the complete film. The uncut ending is important because Craven refuses a clean, heroic transformation. Doug defeats his opponent with furious desperation, yet the image freezes before relief arrives. For one instant, the respectable traveler and the desert attacker appear almost interchangeable. The exploitation hook promised savagery in the wilderness. The deeper idea was more uncomfortable. Civilization may be only a set of habits protected by electricity, roads, and confidence. Remove those protections, and the people calling themselves normal can change very quickly. Number 12. The Driller Killer, 1979. New York looks less like a city of opportunity than a machine grinding everyone down. Abel Ferrara plays Reno Miller, a struggling painter living with two women in a cramped apartment. He cannot finish his latest canvas, cannot satisfy the gallery owner demanding new work, and cannot escape the loud punk band rehearsing in the building. Hunger, unpaid bills, sleeplessness, and wounded pride gradually turn his frustration into violent nighttime behavior. The portable drill made the film infamous, especially after distributors used one shocking image on British video artwork. Yet the movie spends far more time watching Reno fail. He stares at his unfinished painting, complains about money, argues with people who no longer respect him, and wanders through streets filled with individuals society has discarded. During the British video nasty panic, the title and cover became symbols of supposedly dangerous home entertainment. Earlier classified versions were cut, while later editions restored the complete film, and in some cases, a longer director-approved presentation. Watching it uncut changes the balance. The attacks remain disturbing, but they occupy less of the running time than the reputation suggests. The true subject is a man converting humiliation into permission. Reno imagines himself as an artist, misunderstood by the world, yet the film repeatedly shows his selfishness and resentment. By the final scenes, creativity and destruction have merged inside his mind. Instead, it shows how someone who refuses responsibility can turn every disappointment into evidence that other people deserve punishment. Number 11. Island of Death, 1975. Bright sunlight becomes camouflage in this Greek cult shocker. Christopher and Celia arrive on Mykonos, looking like an attractive young couple enjoying a holiday. They rent a house, take photographs, meet local residents, and move easily through the island's relaxed social world. Behind the smiles, however, they are self-appointed judges searching for people they consider immoral. The contrast is the movie's most memorable weapon. White walls, blue water, quiet churches, and postcard views surround acts that would normally belong in a dark urban thriller. That cheerful surface makes them more unsettling than villains who announce themselves through gloomy music and threatening clothes. A police investigator follows their trail, but the story is less interested in whether Christopher and Celia will be caught than in why they believe they are righteous. Christopher repeatedly uses moral language, yet his decisions reveal vanity, jealousy, and appetite. The film's later revelation makes their relationship even stranger and destroys any remaining claim that they are defending traditional values. British authorities rejected the picture and later allowed heavily shortened releases. A longer home edition was eventually classified without the compulsory alterations imposed on an earlier version. Restored, the satire becomes easier to see. The film is not presenting the couple as glamorous avengers. It is exposing people who use morality as a costume for domination. Mykonos remains beautiful. Tourists continue arriving, and the crimes seem like one more secret hidden behind the scenery. Exploitation cinema often promised audiences forbidden sights. Here, the most forbidden idea is that respectable language can make almost any cruelty sound justified. Number 10. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. The world is ending on television before the characters understand it in real life. A news studio loses control, as experts argue, staff members abandon their jobs, and official instructions become useless. Traffic reporter Stephen and producer Francine escape by helicopter with police officers Peter and Roger. After witnessing panic spreading across Pennsylvania, the four discover an enormous shopping mall that appears to contain everything needed for survival. At first, the mall seems like a miracle. They block entrances, remove the wandering dead, collect food, choose expensive clothes, and build a hidden apartment above the stores. Then emptiness begins to replace excitement. Possessing every product means little when there is nowhere to go and nobody left to impress. The film's most famous section arrives when a motorcycle gang breaks inside. Raiders speed through the corridors, grab merchandise, play games, and treat disaster like a party. Their noise opens the building to the dead, while Stephen's determination to defend his mall leads to catastrophe. British versions were repeatedly shortened, and multiple international edits complicated the question of which cut was definitive. Later restorations made several major versions available. including longer presentations with material missing from familiar releases. The additional footage gives Francine, Peter, Roger, and Stephen more room to feel like people, rather than pieces, moving toward action scenes. Uncut, the film's central joke becomes sadder. The dead return to the mall because memory draws them there. The living stay for almost the same reason. Number 9. Zombie Flesh Eaters, 1979. A seemingly empty sailboat drifts into New York Harbor, bringing evidence of a distant catastrophe. After Harbor Patrol officers board it, Anne Bowles learns that the vessel belonged to her missing father. She joins reporter Peter West, and their search leads to the Caribbean island of Matul. There, Dr. Menard is desperately studying a mysterious outbreak, while his exhausted wife begs him to abandon a place that appears to be turning against the living. Lucio Fulci builds dread through tropical heat, empty roads, distant drums, and faces appearing where no person should be standing. The celebrated underwater encounter between a shark and a decaying attacker remains one of exploitation cinema's most unbelievable practical achievements. It feels dangerous because the performer, animal, and camera occupy the same physical space rather than a computer-created environment. Another famous sequence follows a woman trapped inside a room as a wooden splinter moves closer to her eye. Fulci extends the moment through editing, close-ups, and helpless anticipation. That scene, along with later effects, attracted censorship in several territories. In Britain, the film became part of the video nasty controversy, and multiple shortened editions circulated before previous cuts were waived for a later release. The complete version is not simply a collection of restored shocks. Its slower stretches create the sickly atmosphere that makes the final outbreak effective. Menard believes scientific work may produce an explanation, while island traditions offer a much older interpretation. After the survivors escape by boat, the radio reports chaos spreading through New York. The final view of infected figures crossing the Brooklyn Bridge turns an isolated island story into global defeat. Fulci ends by showing that the warning arrived home before anyone could understand it. Number 8. Night Train Murders, 1975. Christmas music and crowded railway stations create a false promise of safety. Two young women, Margaret and Lisa, board a train to visit family during the holidays. Delays force them onto another service, where they encounter two aggressive drifters and an elegant older passenger. Her expensive clothes and controlled voice suggest respectability, but she quietly encourages the men, turning their cruelty into a game she believes she can supervise. Aldo Lotto traps the characters inside a moving train, where help appears physically close, but socially unreachable. Conductors pass, passengers sleep, lights sweep across windows, and the rhythm of the tracks continues, as if nothing unusual is happening. Public transportation becomes more frightening than an abandoned house because society is present everywhere, yet nobody recognizes the danger. Halfway through, the story changes direction. The offenders leave the train, and through extraordinary coincidence, arrive at the comfortable home of Lisa's parents. The father is a doctor committed to reason and restraint. He treats an injured stranger before discovering clues that connect his guests to the tragedy. The respectable house then becomes a second trap, this time controlled by grieving parents. British authorities rejected the film, and it later became associated with the video nasty era. A complete adult release eventually appeared after decades of censorship. The restored version strengthens the class argument. The rough men look threatening and attract suspicion, but the sophisticated woman uses manners, status, and intelligence as camouflage. She is not pulled unwillingly into violence. She directs it while protecting her own image. By moving from a train compartment to an upper-middle-class residence, the film suggests that brutality is not confined to one class or location. It travels easily, especially when polite society refuses to see it. Number 7. The Last House on the Left, 1972. Mary and Phyllis travel into the city for a concert. While attempting to buy drugs, they enter an apartment occupied by escaped criminal Krug, his unstable partner Sadie, his follower Weasel, and Krug's conflicted son Junior. The girls are taken into the countryside, not realizing they are only a short distance from Mari's home. The lakeside section became infamous because the film abandons its earlier joking tone. Craven avoids heroic rescue, stylish villains, or reassuring music. The cruelty is clumsy, ugly, and followed by moments of silence, in which the criminals seem briefly aware that their performance of power has revealed emptiness rather than strength. Coincidence drives the second half. A storm forces the group to seek shelter at the house of Mary's parents, who welcome them before gradually discovering bloody clothing and a distinctive necklace. The dinner scene is almost unbearable, because ordinary conversation continues while knowledge moves silently across the table. Once the parents understand, their comfortable home becomes the setting for improvised revenge. British cinema authorities refused the film, and later video submissions faced cuts, appeals, and legal debate. The complete version was finally classified decades after its production. Restoring it does not transform the movie into polished horror. Craven based the structure loosely on Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, but he removed the spiritual certainty. By the conclusion, the criminals are dead and the parents are alive, yet nobody behaves like a winner. The movie's harshest point is that retaliation may end an immediate threat without restoring the people who carried it out. Number 6. Straw Dogs, 1971. A peaceful move to the countryside becomes a study in resentment, masculinity, and denial. American mathematician David Sumner relocates with his British wife Amy to the Cornish village where she grew up. David wants quiet so he can work, but local men treat him with amusement and view Amy through memories he does not fully understand. Rather than confront hostility, David retreats behind politeness, equations, and the belief that every disagreement can be ignored. Sam Peckinpah fills the early scenes with small invasions. Workers enter the house too freely. A missing cat appears in a disturbing place. Amy changes her behavior to provoke a reaction from a husband who seems emotionally absent. David joins a hunting trip and is deliberately left alone, while tension at home reaches its most controversial point. That central assault sequence created decades of argument, partly because censorship changed its rhythm and therefore changed how Amy's reactions could be interpreted. Shortening material did not necessarily make the scene clearer or more responsible. In some versions, it made the emotional transitions more confusing. British video authorities later rejected the film before a full edition was finally approved after consultation and changing classification standards. The famous siege begins when David protects Henry Niles, a vulnerable local man accused of killing a girl. Villagers surround the house and demand Henry be surrendered. David's refusal initially sounds like principle, but defense quickly awakens something colder. Uncut, the film offers no simple celebration of that transformation. David survives, but survival has not repaired his marriage or clarified his motives. In the final scene, Henry says he does not know the way home. David answers that he does not either, then smiles. The line leaves him physically victorious and morally lost, driving through darkness with no destination that can return him to the man he believed he was. Number 5. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. A calm narrator claims that what follows is a true account, immediately making the audience feel like witnesses rather than customers. Sally Hardesty, her brother Franklin, and 3 friends drive through rural Texas after reports of grave robbing. They pick up a disturbed hitchhiker, visit an abandoned family house, and search for gasoline. One by one, they cross onto a neighboring property where an unemployed slaughterhouse family has created its own economy and rules. Tobe Hooper achieves terror with remarkably little explicit imagery. Heat presses against every scene. Flies gather around faces. Machinery, generators, and animal sounds fill the soundtrack. When Leatherface first appears, he does not deliver a speech or pose for the camera. He strikes suddenly, drags a body away, and slams a metal door. That door may be more frightening than anything shown behind it. The dinner scene is the famous endurance test. Sally is tied to a chair while the family laughs, argues, and attempts to involve their nearly motionless grandfather. Extreme close-ups of her eye, frantic cutting, and overlapping noise create the impression of unbearable graphic detail, although much of the horror exists in suggestion and performance. The B-Flat FC examined the film in the 70s, but concluded that ordinary cuts could not reduce its overall intensity. It remained outside standard British classification for years, and was finally passed uncut in 1999. That history proves how unusual the movie was. Censors could remove an impact, but they could not cut the Texas heat, the screaming soundtrack, or the feeling of being trapped among people whose logic is completely self-contained. The sunrise escape is not a traditional victory. Sally reaches a truck and laughs uncontrollably while Leatherface swings his saw in the road. She has survived physically, yet the laughter tells us part of her remains at the farmhouse. The uncut film endures because it does not depend on excess. It creates a world so convincing that audiences remember seeing far more than Hooper ever placed on screen. Number 4. Pink Flamingos, 1972. Respectability is treated as the enemy in John Waters' handmade midnight movie attack. Divine plays Babs Johnson, a fugitive living in a trailer with her eccentric mother Edie, her delinquent son Crackers, and her companion Cotton. A tabloid has named Babs the filthiest person alive, a title that becomes both celebrity status and personal identity. When rivals Connie and Raymond Marble challenge her reputation, the story turns into an escalating competition for attention. The Marbles believe they can manufacture scandal more efficiently. They run criminal schemes, insult strangers, and send Babs a package designed to humiliate her. Babs responds as though defending a royal crown. Waters presents every confrontation with cheerful music, thrift store costumes, and performances pitched somewhere between underground theater and a children's television show that has gone completely wrong. Several sequences made the film nearly impossible to classify. The final street scene became its most repeated legend, but the mock trial near the conclusion better explains the satire. Babs gathers reporters, announces judgment against her enemies, and turns punishment into a media event. Crime, fame, fashion, and publicity collapse into one performance. The film was not formally submitted to the British board until long after its original midnight success. Early classified versions lost minutes for legal and content reasons. Standards changed over time, and a complete adult classification eventually arrived decades after production. That decision did not mean every scene had become tasteful. It meant context, audience choice, freedom of expression, and proportionality were being judged differently. Watching the full version reveals more than provocation. Waters understood that public outrage can be advertising, and that disgrace can become a profitable brand. His characters do not fear condemnation, because condemnation proves they are visible. Modern celebrity culture has made that joke look almost prophetic. The movie remains intentionally unpleasant, silly, and confrontational. Yet beneath the bad taste is a precise question. Who gets to decide what culture is allowed to display? By building his own stars, locations, costumes, and distribution circuit outside respectable Hollywood, Waters answered through action. If mainstream society would not invite his world inside, he would create a louder world that could not be ignored. Number 3. In the Realm of the Senses, 1976. A private relationship gradually erases the entire outside world in Nagisa Oshima's historical drama. Set in 1930s Japan and inspired by the real case of Sada Abe, the story follows Sada, a former sex worker employed at an inn, and Kichizo, the married owner. Their attraction quickly becomes an all-consuming arrangement. Work, marriage, politics, and social responsibility lose importance as the pair withdraw into rented rooms and repeated rituals of possession. Oshima does not photograph the relationship like a conventional romance. Servants, entertainers, and strangers pass through the rooms, reminding us that society remains nearby, even as Sada and Kichizo behave as if they have invented a separate universe. A restaurant encounter reveals Sada's increasing jealousy, while Kichizo's willingness to surrender control makes the relationship both intimate and dangerous. The movie's explicit presentation caused seizures, bans, legal disputes, and heavily altered releases in multiple countries. In Britain, the law surrounding explicit imagery shaped how it could be screened and classified. Decades later, the complete version received approval for home release. The long censorship history is central to the film's reputation, but reducing it to forbidden content misses Oshima's method. Duration is the key. Repetition shows pleasure turning into routine, routine turning into competition, and competition turning into a demand that neither participant can safely satisfy. Edited editions can make the story appear like disconnected provocation. Uncut, the emotional progression becomes clearer and more disturbing. Every scene narrows the available future until separation feels impossible. The film also works as a political statement. Authority usually appears through governments, armies, or institutions. Here, power operates inside a relationship through desire, jealousy, and voluntary surrender. Sada appears to gain control, yet her identity becomes as dependent on Kichizo as his becomes on her. By the ending, their private rebellion has not produced freedom. It has produced a world containing only ownership and sacrifice. Oshima refuses comforting distance, forcing the audience to examine when intimacy stops being mutual and becomes a struggle to erase the other person's independence completely. Number 2. Salo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Power, Not Pleasure is the true subject of Pier Paolo Pasolini's final film. Drawing from the Marquis de Sade, while relocating the story to the last period of Italian fascism, Pasolini follows four wealthy authorities who abduct young people and imprison them inside a guarded estate. They create regulations governing speech, meals, movement, and obedience, turning the villa into a miniature state where cruelty is presented as administration. The men are not wild outsiders hiding from civilization. They represent political, financial, religious, and judicial authority. Their expensive clothes, formal ceremonies, and careful schedules make the film more disturbing than a story about uncontrolled criminals. Everything is organized. Older storytellers provide material for new humiliations. Guards enforce instructions, and victims are numbered, inspected, and treated like property. The dining hall sequences are among the most infamous, but the final observation through binoculars contains the clearest argument. Punishment occurs in a courtyard, while powerful men take turns watching from a comfortable room. Two young guards change the radio station and begin dancing. Their ordinary movement shows how quickly people can adapt when horror becomes employment. British censors rejected the film in the 70s. An uncut club screening was rated. An especially altered version later circulated under limited conditions. After classification policy changed, the complete film was passed in 2000. Restoration did not make it more accessible in an emotional sense. It restored the relentless structure Pasolini designed. Repetition is intentional. The audience waits for rebellion, escape, or a sympathetic authority figure. But the system has removed every outside appeal. Even the guards are compromised. By denying viewers a conventional hero, Pasolini prevents the material from becoming a simple survival thriller. The refined visual style is essential. Symmetrical rooms, paintings, music, and fashionable clothing show culture being used as decoration for domination. The film attacks the reassuring belief that education and taste automatically produce morality. Its complete form remains difficult because the accusation is larger than any isolated scene. When rulers possess unlimited power, they can redesign language until exploitation sounds like law, ritual, duty, or even entertainment. Number 1. Thriller. A Cruel Picture, 1973. Revenge is not an emotional explosion here. It is a skill learned one lesson at a time. Christina Lindberg plays Frigga, called Madeline. In some versions, a young Swedish woman left unable to speak after childhood trauma. Years later, she accepts a ride from Tony, a charming stranger who gradually traps her through drugs, isolation, and coercion. He sends false letters to her parents, destroys her connection to home, and treats her dependence as a business opportunity. Director Bo Arne Vibenius stretches confrontations through extreme slow motion. A punch, fall, or gunshot can take several times longer than expected. Instead of creating fast excitement, the technique makes revenge feel ritualistic and predetermined. Frigga does not attack in panic. She has imagined every movement so thoroughly that the world seems to slow down to match her concentration. Censors in Sweden shortened the original version, while international distributors released drastically reduced edits under titles such as "They Call Her One Eye." For years, many viewers knew only those shorter editions. Modern restorations have made the extended original cut available in some markets, although specific legal cuts can still vary by territory. That complication is worth remembering. Uncut is not always one universal object. A complete release in one country may still differ from the version legally sold somewhere else. Her confrontation with Tony avoids a triumphant speech because Frigga cannot give one. She uses the methods she practiced, leaves him helpless, and watches without celebration. When she finally drives away, freedom remains uncertain. Training has allowed her to escape a controller, but the film never promises that escape will restore the life, family, or voice taken from her. That refusal is why the picture remains number 1. Its notorious reputation may attract viewers, yet its strange pacing and silent performance stay in the memory. Beneath the exploitation packaging is a bleak portrait of a woman, forced to construct power in a world where every institution arrived too late, or never arrived at all. These films were cut, rejected, seized, or hidden for very different reasons, but censorship gave each one a forbidden mythology. Restored editions finally let audiences judge the complete stories instead of shortened substitutes. Some missing footage increases intensity. Other footage restores character, pacing, and political meaning. Tell us which uncut version surprised you most. Then like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this countdown with every fan of fearless 70s cinema.